Welcome to Experience Junkies. On this show, I bring together meeting and event professionals, global travelers, jet setters, and more to relive the moments we never want to forget. More importantly, we'll attempt as best we can to transport listeners to transformational points in our lives. By diving into the indelible impact these experiences have had on us, we decode small takeaways about how to be better humans than we were yesterday. On today's show, I have a very special guest. She's really made a name for herself in the past year and a half in the hospitality industry. And it's none other than Jen Salerno from the Room Block podcast. We talk about an experience she had with her husband celebrating a belated wedding anniversary. And they had a whirlwind trip in Europe. So please sit back, listen in to our chat. How we discuss how to behave when in Rome and outside of your home. All right, we are live. I have with me Jennifer Salerno. And Jennifer, I'm so excited to have you with me. Just take a second and introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Deanna. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm really excited for you to start this podcast. So thank you for having me, first of all. But yes, I'm Jen Salerno. I am a 20-year veteran of the events and hospitality industry. Done hotels, CVB, and housing bureau work. I am actually the host of my own podcast called The Room Block. It is the podcast where hospitality and event professionals meet. And I'm also available to host, MC, or moderate your virtual or live event.
Wonderful. That was a perfect little intro. I need lessons from you on my elevator pitch. Jen, we actually met through your podcast. I'm glad that you called that out. That's been kind of your pet project, your baby, kind of during COVID, post-COVID. So tell me about that experience and kind of how you got into it and, how you've been enjoying it so far.
Oh, sure. Yes. And this is really why I'm so excited for you too, because it's been extremely life enhancing. I started the podcast last summer, so in summer of 2020, and really it was a direct result of becoming furloughed and eventually laid off from my previous industry position. And it was a way to channel my energy. I was not used to not working and not having a purpose. So this was a perfect way for me to take that, frustration and sadness and grief and turn it into something very positive. And at the same time, stay connected to this beloved industry of ours. It totally accomplished that. Not only stay connected to my former network, but enhance and expand my network so much. Like you said, we met through chatting about my podcast, and I've met so many other wonderful people. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I'm hoping some of your good juju will rub off on me with this project, but I totally agree. I feel like once we met, we just kind of hit it off, and we've just been champions for each other ever since. So glad to have you here today. So, this show is all about travel and events and experiences. And I know, through work, you've traveled. I know I have. But what's typically your travel philosophy for pleasure? What kind of vibe are you seeking when you travel?
That is a good question. So we're not the type to take a lot of small trips. And I think that has probably just in the past been schedule related. We have 2 young children, ages 7 and 10. So, just with school schedules and the fact that life just gets busy, we're not the type to do a lot of like little weekends away. So when we travel, we tend to plan and then do like a big trip.
I love it. Go all out, go big or go home.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm very, very fortunate to have grandparents that live nearby us. And so my husband and I have gotten a chance, we've done some awesome trips with the kids and some trips without them, which I know is it may be unique for some parents with younger children to actually have the chance to get away solo, but we have, and it's been wonderful.
Wonderful. That's pretty cool. And you went on an epic anniversary trip with your husband. But before we dive in, what I kind of took away immediately when you told me about this was it was for your 12th anniversary. So why the 12-year mark? Like typically that's not a milestone.
Well, exactly. And I was going to write to you and say a belated 10-year anniversary. The plan was to go for our 10. I don't remember why we didn't. Just something, some kind of life got in the way. But so we actually finally did plan it in 2018, and so went for our 12th. So it was just a belated 10-year.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah. I loved when you mentioned earlier about having the benefit of grandparents close by and being able to maximize on that opportunity and get away just with your husband. I would love to remind any listeners out there who are married and maybe you have young children to rely on your village if you can, when possible, because marriage is for life and typically kids are for 18 years. So keep that in mind if you can get that time with your spouse, your significant other, your partner, to definitely take advantage of it if you can. So yeah, I want to circle back to this anniversary trip that you took. So you and your husband went to Europe and you went to 2 different locations. So how did you 2 land on where you wanted to go?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember exactly how it went down, but we had been to Europe before. Husband had been to Italy twice. We had been to Italy together. I had been to Paris separately. I went with my mom, my sister, my aunt. And so Paris, first of all, was a place that I really wanted my husband to experience. So he went to art school. He's very artistic. He appreciates architecture and all of that. So I thought, like, you have to see this. But it's very hard for us to travel to Europe and not go to Italy because we just love it so much. And haven't gone that many times, but it's just, there's so many different regions within Italy. It's hard to not go back and to explore more. So we decided to, my mother very much encouraged us to take like 2 weeks or 10 days or however long it was, like not just a week, like please, if you're going, go, because you're not going to go like every year. And she was right. So we decided to, just pick these 2 destinations. And I think, we flew between the 2. We didn't take a train, but we were trying to debate how we would travel between the 2. We flew, and it was very easy to do that. And so that's how we landed on the 2.
So you were in Paris, and then what area in Italy were you in?
I just love this area, and I hesitate to tell people because it's like, don't go. Keep it.
You can be general, right? Like in this kind of region,
I'm kidding.
But not specifically this city.
No. Okay. There's a region of Italy called the Cinque Terre, and it is 5 fishing villages. And it's on the northern coast of Italy. I think they call it the Italian Riviera. So it's not that far from like the French Riviera is just south a little bit. And it's not fancy like that. So they're like 5 villages, and they're like built into the cliffs on the ocean or some kind of sea. I forget what the sea was, but you can't there's no car access really. You can get there by a train, and there are hiking trails that connect these 5 villages. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people end up taking day trips to them from Florence or wherever nearby. And we witnessed that while we were there. We actually stayed in one of the villages called Manarola. We stayed there for 5 nights. So I'm so glad that we did that instead of just doing the day trip, because we were fully able to immerse ourselves into that experience. But it was fascinating and kind of sad to see how hordes of people would descend upon these little villages, walk around, do their thing, and then leave. I mean, of course, it's it's tourism, and that's
Right.
cities rely on that. But I don't know them when they were built in the 13th century. It was intended for thousands of people to come walk those streets at the same time. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. It's so
Yeah.
funny you mentioned that because, during the height of COVID, seeing all these very touristy locations that were desolate, there was no one visiting them. And you could see what would happen if tourism was removed in terms of helping the infrastructure, helping the environment. And, tourism is great for economies, it's great for jobs, but, there's two sides of the sword, right? There's other things that come along with it. So I love that you mentioned
Yes.
that kind of, just because the town might like all the dollars that are influxing with these people that are coming in, is the infrastructure meant to support these, like you said, hordes of people coming in every day?
Yeah.
I find it interesting that you were kind of in Paris, this like very cosmopolitan kind of, renowned for just being super trendy, very, a large metropolitan area. And then you went to the Cinque Terre, which are these remote villages, fishing villages, sounds a little more rugged. Kind of talk
Right.
about like the extreme of those two experiences kind of converging.
Yes. Well, and it's funny when I think about it, maybe that is our actual true travel philosophy, because we've kind of followed a similar pattern in the past. Like for our honeymoon, for example, we went to Hawaii and we started in Honolulu, and then we ended up in Maui. So kind of go from like the more city feel and then go
Right.
to like a more remote feel.
Mhm.
And we've done that with other trips in the past too. So I think our philosophy there is that we're coming from Chicago, we're coming from a big city. So I think it's kind of like, how do we integrate? How do we ease into a vacation and go from
Mhm.
big city to big city, explore that, get our walking in, and Paris, it was 5 days of just walking and eating and drinking. And I mean, but so much walking and just
Right.
exploring. That's what we like to do, is just like hit the ground and walk.
Mhm.
And we did that. And it was wonderful. But so then after a few days, 5, 6 days of that, then it's like, okay, now we're in full vacation mode. Now we can ease into the next destination that's like a little more chill, a little more calm, and go for that. But it did feel very different. That's true.
I like how you talked about the journey, kind of emotional, of leaving home, the hustle and bustle of like everyday life of work, schlepping kids to school and all of that entails, then going to another metropolitan area. So you're on vacation, but you're kind of still, on alert of like your day to day. And then like you kind of wore yourself out essentially to get to the point where you could really kind of really relax and kind of decompress. So I love how you guys basically kind of planned it according to your mood and your emotions and what you guys knew you would need at the beginning of the trip versus the tail end of that. So
Yeah.
I would love to kind of hear from you. If you could like close your eyes, bear with me for a second, Jen. Now you're in the hustle and bustle of Paris. You guys are eating, you're exploring, you're seeing all these things. And now you've flown to the Cinque Terre region of Italy, and you open your eyes, you step out of the airport. What's your first impression?
Well, I guess I have to back up and say we flew into, trying to remember now, I think we flew into Milan.
Okay.
And we took a train, because the
Okay.
only way to get there was to take a train. And it was a little stressful because we're like behind on the train schedule. So that whole journey was stressful travel day. But so I'm going to say we get off this tiny regional train that actually ends up getting us into the Cinque Terre. And I was so happy that we made it before the sun was down, because it was sunset, but the sun was not totally down. And so I mentioned that these are villages, built into the cliffs.
Mm-hmm.
So we get off the train and we're just looking and we're like, okay, we need to walk with our luggage up. I mean, every road is just like a steep ramp. And stones and, like they're not like roads we have here. And we're going to try to find our little, vacation rental for the next few days. And it's like a matter of, you have to call the guy, and he was waiting for us because we had actually arrived a little bit late. And he's like, "Oh, I'll meet you down with the key," like a real key. It's like, it was so fantastic to finally get there because it was such a stressful travel day. And then you arrive and I couldn't believe, I kept saying, and my husband's like, "Stop saying this." It sounds, why would you say that? I said, "I can't believe this place exists."
Right.
Because it was like out of a storybook. I mean, just like people live here. People live here. It was like just this little fantasy village. So, I hope I'm describing it correctly or giving you the answer that you're seeking. But I mean, really just for going from the hustle bustle of Paris, the various train rides throughout the day, the plane ride, the train rides throughout the day, and then finally exiting and just seeing this little beautiful village where you were just like, we finally made it. Like, but then to make it and to see the sun setting, and it was just like, wow, like now we have arrived. This is now a vacation.
You shared some amazing photos with me, and I love the one, there's like the sunset, and I feel like it really encapsulates that area because you see the rows of fishing boats, and I imagine it just has like the smell of sea air constantly. And I'm thinking of seagulls, and just, I don't know about you, but anytime I go to the water, whether it's a beach or a lake or whatever, type of water experience, it is so soothing and calming. Just the hearing the water rush, but also like the sea breeze and the wind and the smells that come along with that. I read a study recently that just talked about, all the physical benefits of just living near a body of water. And just one of them is just, it's actually stress relieving just because of the sights and sounds of living near the water. So I can imagine that getting off that tiny regional train after a full day of travel. And for anyone who is, like us Americans, and if you haven't traveled to Europe, it's different because things are smaller. The cities are very much more congested. So it's not built for traveling like Americans with 5 pieces of luggage like we're used to, it's not built for that. It's cobblestone roads, and the cars are smaller as well. The people are smaller. So it is, I totally understand. I actually just got back from Spain last week, and it was definitely, I had that experience of, lugging luggage through the train, and yeah, it's stressful. And so for you to kind of like go through the slog of experiencing all that, and then finally not only to arrive to this beautiful quaint village, but in time for sunset, like that just sounds like the epitome of reaching the mountaintop.
Yes, it was. And you could say pun intended, because it was up there.
You were on a mountain.
We were on a little mountain, but and then just that, Italian hospitality, they were so gracious, even though we arrived late, but just because it was like a husband and wife, they owned this little place, and they're just like, we'll bring you to your unit, and it was just like this little apartment, super cute, like weird, right? Like not like a hotel room that we're used to, but which is exactly what I wanted. I just wanted our little place, and it was wonderful. There we had a little place to sit outside, and every morning, we would wake up by the sound of the church bells ringing. It's just like, again, like, am I really here? Does this place really exist, or have I died and gone to heaven? Like, what
exactly.
is this?
Exactly. Yeah. So talk a little bit about the people, right? I think anyone that loves traveling or attending events and experiences, a large part of that is, sharing that time and that space with other human beings, right? The human element. So tell me a little bit about like the owners of the facility, the waiters and waitresses. Was there anyone during that trip that just really, left a mark on you and you'll never forget them?
Well, there is a really funny story that I have to share. This is out of Paris, actually. So the first part of that trip. So I sent you a photo of a waiter that was I think our last night in Paris, and he after we were sitting outside and after, a little bit of wine, as one does in Paris, look at this waiter and I'm like, man, he looks just like Aaron Rodgers, like the Packers quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm going to ask him if he's ever heard that before. My husband's like, oh, he's a Bears fan. He's like, don't even talk about the Packers. But so I say, has anyone ever told you look like Aaron Rodgers? And he goes, Aaron Roger? Aaron Roger? Oh, we.
Oh, nice.
We would just laugh about it like forever because just the way he said Aaron Roger.
Roger.
I mean, it was just like a silly thing, but and I have to say it was fascinating to experience hospitality. Well, in Europe in general, I will give the nod to Paris though. Oh, like my husband was. I hate to say this, but I just have to say it because he kind of mentioned he'd never been to Paris, and he kind of had that preconceived notion. He said, "Are French people going to be rude?" That's what I've always heard. I'm like, I know they're not, but so we go, and like the first night we're there, and the waitstaff, and it was like within like 2 seconds, my husband was disarmed because they're lovely, so gracious. I mean, it is a profession, to serve out there, and they take it very seriously and so generous and like I said, just gracious and welcoming. So everybody was like that. Honestly, even more so in Paris than the region that we were in Italy. People were very gracious and wonderful. I felt like they were a little weary. And I do want to mention that again, just because of how I was struck by the onslaught of tourists that would come in during the day. But in general, everybody was just very gracious. But yes, our innkeeper, just so sweet, so wonderful. We're all trying to understand each other. I mean, they could speak English, but it's like not super easy.
Right.
The accents are very strong, and but they're just so helpful, so welcoming. Here's different restaurants. Go to this place. Tell them I sent you. That kind of thing.
Wonderful.
So
what I love about Europeans, because so many of them are bilingual, trilingual even, a lot of times they'll say, oh, my English is so bad. And I'll tell them, your English is way better than my Spanish or my French or my Italian. Their standards are a lot higher in terms of language acquisition than I would say definitely in North America, at least for the United States. And I know Canadians, a lot of them speak French and English, but that's what I really respect about a lot of Europeans is them speaking 2, 3, 4 languages and having a good enough concept that they can speak it and have conversation. There might be some grammar or some minor issues, but the fact that you can comprehend that much and share that with someone else, I'm in awe every time because it's amazing to me. So that's always sometimes if I go out of the country, sometimes that's my favorite aspect of traveling is if I can share a moment with someone in their native language. And like I feel like it's just the most essential part of human interaction, just communicating on a very real level. So I totally understand what you mean in terms of, using Google Translate as much as you can, but trying to also kind of speak, whatever Italian or French that you can and share that with the local people. Talk a little bit more about that. I love how you mentioned, or I don't know if I love how you mentioned, but I appreciate that you mentioned maybe some weariness of those who are around you. What were the other tourists like? Did you kind of sense that they came from certain areas, or was it really an international crowd? Or what kind of sense did you get in terms of the tourist impact on the local people and, their interpretation of that and how they received it?
Well, what's always so interesting about traveling to Europe is that, when you meet other tourists, you're meeting them from all over the world. It's not just you're not just meeting Italians in Italy, you're meeting Australians and you're meeting Germans or whatever. So that was really interesting. And so we strangely enough, we did end up meeting a lot of Americans more so in when we were in Manarola and in the Cinque Terre area. But we tend to not do a lot of organized activities when we're on vacation. You know, like I mentioned, we just tend to walk a lot. But I'm glad that we did take a chance in Manarola to take a boat tour. And so it was a small, just because like the sea was just exquisite. I'm like, well, we got to get out there. We need to get on that water. So we did take the chance to book this little boat tour. And there was maybe like 5 couples on the boat. So it wasn't huge. And then our, the captain, and his name was Daniele, and he was a riot. I mean, so good, like just doing his boat tour thing and told great stories, but he had this funny Italian way about him. Just very engaging, very good storyteller. But I did have a chance to ask him as we were coming back from wherever we were out visiting. I said, how do you all feel about the tourism here? I was really curious. And he said, of course, we're so blessed, to have such a beautiful place to live. And, he had left to go elsewhere, and then he ended up coming back to work with his brother, and they both own these boat tours. Yeah. But he said, he said it is hard on the locals. In particular, like I mentioned, the day trippers that come in the massive tours, because yes, they're coming in, but they're not necessarily utilizing or experiencing the restaurants in that city. They're walking around, but they're not staying in the hotels. They're not eating in the restaurants. They're there to like sightsee it and then leave. So in a way, they're not even always contributing to the economy of the area. And he told us a story of a local family who came outside, and there were a whole bunch of people just like eating, they had like packed sandwiches or something from somewhere else. And they were just eating on someone's front lawn, and just like, can you imagine if that were you? And you have this, this place, your family home, and then you just have tourists like eating in your front yard. So that hurt me a bit, just because I was able to witness firsthand what it was like to be in that village, waking up in the morning and having it be empty and so peaceful. In the middle of the day, it was like you had to get out of there almost. That's when we took our chance to go hike up in the hills. We're like, it's like crazy. But then to come back in the evening and then have it be just peaceful and quiet again. So it was an interesting thing to experience.
Yeah, I think it's so important that when we do travel outside of our native area, our home, that we're conscious of how we're affecting those around us. That, if you're just traveling for an Instagram shot, if you're just traveling to see things, but you're not actually exchanging with the people, I think it's really irresponsible. Not just from like you said, the infrastructure standpoint, but also just kind of rude. You're in their home, you're in the place where they reside. So if you can't find a way to connect and share with the people, because what I find too, a lot of times when I travel is they want to ask me questions about where we're from too. They may not know someone, they might know people from America, but they may have never met someone from Ohio. So they want to ask, what's the weather like in Ohio? And, what are the people like? And so it's not just about us going and gleaning from the locals and taking from them, but also sharing our little piece of the world with them and leaving that behind too. So, yes. I love the interchange of travel when it's truly an exchange of, people to people. That's kind of the best part of it to be. So yes. I appreciate you mentioning, their take on how they're affected.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to put a negative spin on it, but it is just like awareness, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just a couple more questions. I'm really loving this conversation, Jen, but I see a lot of outdoorsy types of photos. So I'm assuming when you guys were in the Cinque Terre region that you were doing a lot of hiking and kind of what was that experience like for you too?
Oh, okay. So yes, we did. So this was October time frame. And it was interesting because Paris was, I don't know, maybe like in the 60s at the time, 50s, 60s. It was it was 70s
Mm-hmm.
there. So I was happy about that because it was great weather for hiking. But okay, these hikes, like I'm not a super experienced hiker. Like when we go to Wisconsin and hike, I mean, it's like pretty like level ground for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
This, like, I think I sent you some photos, and I remember taking them as we kept going up and up and up. Like these were straight up these mountainous areas, and it
Mm-hmm.
was just steps, steps, steps. And I'm just like, I don't even know how many steps this is, but like you're just getting up there, and it's through this amazing thing about these hiking trails that connect these different cities is that you're actually going through like people's yards in a way, like, and not in
Mm-hmm.
a bad way. I mean, it's just like you're walking these trails, and then there's homes just right next to you. I mean, so you're really seeing these, what it's like to live
Live.
in it's a very heavy agricultural area. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they grow their, of course, their grapes, and there were olive trees everywhere. So we were walking, and you would just go through like an olive orchard, and there was a part when we were ending a hike. We went from one village to another, and we were coming back now down. And just, I mean, it was just at this point it was just all kind of like loose rock, but like
Mm-hmm.
big, like you could step on them. So I just remember like trying to like step and like dance my way down because it's steep, and I'm like, you kind of have like momentum when you're going down a steep hill, but you have to be careful with the steps. But there were these trees above us, and I don't know what kind of trees they were, but the bees, there were thousands of bees buzzing within them, like honeybees. Like, so I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't scared. I was a little scared, but you could just hear this intense sound of the buzzing of the bees and the smell of the flowers. And I'm like dancing down these rocks. It was just like a really interesting moment, right? Where
Right.
you're just
Right.
like, again, where am I? We're not in Kansas anymore. But
Definitely.
yeah, but it was the hikes are amazing. They're hard. They were hard.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'm not seasoned, and like I said, but they're just very rocky, very steep, narrow, cliff like. But then rewarded when you get up into up way up high, and you can overlook the sea. It's gorgeous.
When you describe that to me, Jen, and you're talking about like kind of that buzzing of bees just kind of in the background, it makes me think while you're climbing that song "Flight of the Bumblebee" in the background, like kind of like that that real fast symphony song, and just kind of like your emotions as you're climbing higher and higher in altitude and a really steep cliff. But
Yeah.
with that, what I would love to know from you is if you could pick a song to encapsulate this trip with your husband, what song would it be and why?
I guess I'd have to go with Paradise by Coldplay
Oh,
because that's
nice.
what it was. That's what it was to me. I was trying to remember. I'm like, did I have a song going through my head while I was there? Because that always happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It was almost 3 years ago now, so I don't remember if that was happening at the time. Although I feel like it might have been because I keep mentioning it, but you're just so astounded by where you are, and again, how can this place be real? How can I really be here? So I would say
Mm-hmm.
that has to encapsulate it because it was paradise. It was paradise for us. I mean, if I could spend all of my days doing that, and like, no offense to my children, I love my children, but people would say you were gone from your kids for so long, or whatever. It was like maybe, I don't know, 12 days or something total. And they're like, didn't you miss your kids? And we said, we miss Italy now more than we missed our kids when we were there.
There.
Like, no offense, but like, it was just such a different kind of experience
Mm-hmm.
to be in that setting, to be out of, not working, not having to think about anything else other than what we were going to do that day. And I'm very
Mm-hmm.
lucky to have a wonderful traveler companion in my husband. Like we really mesh on everything that we
Mm-hmm.
want to do. We like to eat at the same time. We like to wake up at the same time. I mean, it's not like we're unbalanced. So we're just in this constant rhythm of just like doing the next cool thing that we want to do.
It's
it was
almost like
paradise, so.
it's almost like solo travel, but not. Like you guys have the same mindset, but two different people on the trip together.
Yes. And solo travel is not something I have done yet. Well, aside from work, that's a little different, but because it's not really super solo, as you know. But that would be my next goal for sure.
Well, maybe if
trip.
you have a solo trip, we'll have you back to kind of get your insights on how that goes.
Yes, I feel like that would be a huge challenge, like an incredible reward. I know it would be very rewarding, but I also feel like it would be challenging just to navigate by yourself.
I am an extrovert, and I did surprisingly much better on a solo trip than I ever would have thought. So definitely for anyone who's considering it, I wouldn't be too intimidated by the thought of being alone, because it might actually surprise you.
And you did Mexico, right? Yes.
Part of it was in a group, but then I did do a portion solo. So
yeah,
it surprised me how much I really enjoyed that time alone. So I definitely want to put that plug in for anyone who's thinking about a solo trip to try it.
Yes. I
will.
Well,
Jen, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed this conversation. Jen, remind the audience where they can find you and where they can catch up with you outside of this podcast episode.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Well, the Room Block podcast I have a website for that. So it's roomblockpodcast.com. I am on Instagram and LinkedIn at both JT Salerno personally, or Jen Salerno on LinkedIn. And then Room Block Podcast has a company on both Instagram and LinkedIn. So you can find me in all those places. Personal website coming soon. Not quite yet, but be on the lookout.
Nice. Maybe by the time this airs, it will be live, and we will be glad to include that in the show notes.
All right, that should be my goal. that would be a good driver. So thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jen, and thank you everyone for listening. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Deanna.
This has been another episode of the Experience Junkies podcast. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. Please feel free to leave us a review. Let us know what you're thinking in the comments of this show. Make sure to also subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts or on our YouTube channel. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.